Hi everybody, today we will be working with the particle system. So if you remember from the last video, we created the particle system force field, and the way we did that, just to refreshing, is we right clicked the mouse, we went down to effects, we hit particle system force field and particle system to make both this particle system force field and particle system. If you don't know what the particle system force field is, I recommend you watching this video. I'll leave a link to it. And so let's get started on the particle system. So first of all, this particle system has a bunch of different like little components, little sections where you could change. All these are little sections. If you click on them, you could open them up. So first of all, we're going to start with duration. Duration is just how long the particle system will play. It's almost the same thing as the start lifetime. The start lifetime in seconds, the particle will die when the lifetime reaches 0. So this particle, if you put 10, those particles will die within 10 seconds. And you could also see the playback time right here. But you also got to remember that there's a duration of 5 seconds. Now this is, like it says right here, the length of the particle system that is emitting if the system is looping. So if it is not looping, then this indicates just one cycle, this number right here. So it'll run for 5 seconds, wait until this is over, which is 10 seconds, and then it'll start dying off the particle system. So that's start lifetime, that's duration. Looping just means it'll play over and over and over the same particle system. So if you check looping, you get the option to pre-warm. Now pre-warm is option if you want to have the particle system as soon as the game starts playing. So let's say you have a snow theme and you want the snow to fall as soon as the player starts the game, then you would check this pre-warm, and then it would start right away with no delay. That's why the start delay gets canceled when you check that. So start delay, as it implies, it would just delay when you can start. So if you put 2 seconds, it will start within the 2 seconds. Okay, so let's leave it at 0. And like I mentioned in the other video before also, that these little arrows, you can click on them and you could choose. Some you could only choose these 2 options. Some you got more options, like a curve, random between 2 constants, and random between 2 curves. So let's see this one. This one's random between 2 constants. That means random between 2 numbers. So if I put 1 and 2, the start delay is going to be randomized between 1 and 2 seconds. So between 1 and 2, there you go. And so that's that for the start delay. And for start lifetime, this, oh, I already mentioned that. Start speed, that's how fast they will start. So if we put something real high, they will start real fast. Let's put something even higher so you could see. So they start real fast. We'll set this back to what it was at 5. So now it starts and it don't take as long when it does start, or the speed is not that fast. And then for 3D start size, so first start size is just the size of it when it starts. So you could see, you could adjust it real small, or you could do it real big. And then if you want to do, like, let's say 3D start size, then you could adjust each axis individually. So the x-axis, the left and right. So if you want to make them wider, you can make them wider. If you want to make them shorter, you can make them shorter. This one, of course, is for 3D games, like I mentioned before. And we'll set this back, put this something pretty small so we can see all of them individually. And then 3D rotation is the same thing as the 3D star size. It lets you rotate on all 3 axes. This one would be good for 3D games. It could be good for some 2D games to rotate on the Z. So it'll rotate, for example, if you look over here, it'll rotate like this. If I could do it in a circular motion. And then for set this back to 0. For flip rotation, if you flip it, it'll just, if you put 1, it flips it completely. Flip it halfways. Get the idea on that. Start color, you could choose any color for the start, any one you want, and you could adjust it however you want, any color. And then for this example, we'll leave it at white because later on we could change it as well. This one also has a gradient, so you could change it to gradient, and it'll have 2 colors. And it has random between 2 colors, so we can have 2 colors randomized, and also random color, so it will just pick a random color between all these colors. Now if you want to add a color, you just double click on this edge, and then it adds this little tab for you. And then once that little tab is added, you could click the color, and you could choose a color, anyone you want. And then you could also use the color picker right here and choose any color from anywhere on the scene. Wherever the mouse is, that will be the color. So for us, we want this green. And then yeah, you could, since this is random, it'll just pick randomly between all these colors right here that you could see. And after that, we'll set this back to color, leave it just white. And gravity modifier, if I uncheck external forces, so you could see this external forces was used in the last video to show how to use the force field. So I'm gonna uncheck it so you can see how to use the gravity. Now for gravity, if you set it to a high number, it will fall downwards. If you send it to a negative number, it will start falling upwards. And that's that for the gravity. Simulation space is where the particles will be simulated on. It could be local. It usually is local. It could be world position, or it could be custom position. Now for custom position, you could select a custom simulation space, which just would be a transform, which pretty much, like I said, every game object has. So if you go to the main camera, it has a transform. So technically I could drag this main camera into here, and whatever rotation this camera has, this one will also simulate with it. So for that, we could also hit world. World will simulate in world space, and local and local. And then simulation speed is just the speed of the whole simulation. So if you put 2 seconds, it'll double the speed. If you put 5, it'll make the speed times 5. And yeah, you get the point. And then delta time, this is used for when you're coding. You could set this to unscaled or scaled. Delta time is just a way of manipulating time, so to slow time down, to speed time up, stuff like that. Scaling mode, you could also scale through the local scale, through the shape of it says right here, the shape of the whole entire hierarchy, or the shape of the module. You could also use the hierarchy, which the hierarchy, it says right here, is just use the combined scale from our entire hierarchy. So if you have multiple, let's say multiple particle systems or different game objects linked together, you could use the hierarchy one. Play on awake. This, if you check it, as soon as you play the game, this particle system will start. If this is not checked, then the particle system will not start until you code it through script. And then emitter velocity. you could use the rigid body to emit the velocity, or you could use the transform to emit it. So then after that, there's max particles. Max particles, you could set them to be 1 particle, or you could set it to its default to 1,000. It's just how much particles you could have in your particle system. Auto random seed, you could uncheck this, and if you uncheck it, this is just gives you a random seed. And random seed pretty much is it's something that randomizes your particles but keeps it randomized in that same way, if that makes sense. So let's say there's a particle here. There's 1 particle on the left side, 1 in the middle, and 1 on the right side. It will always emit that particle the same way every time. Now if you have auto, it will switch it up, so the left particle could be on top, the right one could be on the bottom, and so forth. Now stop action is what the particle should do when it stops. So you could disable it. So once it stops, just disable the game object or the particle system. You could destroy it, or you can call it back. So, and then culling mode. Culling mode is pretty much, or I think that culling, yeah, something like that. Anyways, that's if you want let's say your particle system moves off screen and then moves back on screen. This will allow you to either pause the particle system when it's not on screen and then catch up, which means the particle system already playing when it comes back on screen. You could pause it, which just pauses it when it's off screen, but when it's back on screen, you have to code it to come back on, or you can always simulate it. So no matter what, if it's off or on screen, it will always simulate. Now after that, there's ring buffer mode. Now this has to do with each individual particle. So you could ring buffer mode. You could pause each particle until they're replaced, or you could loop them until they're all replaced, each particle. Because see, what each particle does is they go into the world, and then they get destroyed, and then when they get destroyed, they get put back into the particle system, and they start all over. So kind of like a looping thing. So it could loop until they're all replaced, or it could be disabled, or it could be paused until replaced. Usually it's disabled. I never had to move this or put paused or loop, so you should be fine with not messing with that. But give all of this a try. There's something you might figure out that I haven't, or there's something you might see that's really neat. Anyways, in emission now, so we could close this particle thing. In emission, there's rate over time. So this is how much particles will spawn over time. So if we put 500, 500 will spawn every time, and then until it reaches to the max particles, which is 1,000. And then after that, there's rate over distance. So this will as it says right here, the normal number of particles emitted per distant unit. So this will rate a certain amount of particles every unit, or every distant unit. So 0. Now there's bursts. Bursts also, if you click plus on the list, you can add a burst. Time, this is how much time the burst might be. This could be, you could switch it between just one. So a burst of 500, or you could have a random between 2. So let's say a burst of it's too much, 100 and 500, and then it just shows one burst. And then you could have, let's say, infinity cycles, and it'll just keep doing that little burst just over and over. And then you could have the probability of that burst happening. So it could be like half a chance that that burst will happen. So, or at least a good amount of the burst. And then so like say 0.1%, you can see that there's bursts in the middle of it. But yeah, and then let's take that burst off. Let's put it back to 10, or let's put it 100 so you could kind of see it. So that's that for emission. Shape, if we look on this window, on our scene window, we could see this little cone shape. This would be the shape. You could change it a sphere. You could change it a hemisphere. Anything you want. Mesh or mesh renderer if you're in 3D mode. Skin mesh renderer also. Sprite or sprite renderer in 2D mode. So if you click sprite, now it will take a sprite right here, and you could just add a certain sprite, and it will almost it should emit how can you say it? It should emit the particles in the shape of that sprite, but since we don't have really any sprites, we just got default sprites. It don't really look good. One day when I make a game or a tutorial of a game, we'll probably use this for something, maybe to highlight the character so people know that he collected a power and now he has some sort of superpower or energy. And then we'll click this back to cone like we had it, and then this is the angle of the cone. So if you see these blue lines over here, let me shrink this, these blue lines, you could see that now it's more like circular, and if I adjust the angle, it will get wider. Now for radius, you could adjust the radius and it will adjust the bottom part, but also the whole thing. Radius thickness, this is good to especially like when it's 3D, that way you can see the actual top part. And we got the arc. So this arc thing, this one is good also for like spheres. Like I'll show you better with the sphere, but you can see when you start shrinking it, the arc of the cone starts getting smaller. So let's say a sphere. Now the radius will make it pretty small. Now this is a sphere, but you can see it's cut off, and the reason it's cut off is because we cut it off with the arc. We folded it pretty much almost in half, and that's why it's like that. So we go back to let's say to the what do we have, cone. We'll set the arc back, and then we could also have random, which is loop. As you can see, is like a zigzag, just loops between the two areas. There's ping pong. Ping pong does the same thing, but in a more smoother way. If you can see, it's like more sharper, the loop, and then the ping pong is a little more smoother. Burst spread, as it implies, it's like a little burst, and it should spread. Let me get it to 360. So that's the burst spread. And then when you do have like this, you could adjust the actual spread to be halfways, whatever. Same with the ping pong. You could adjust it how you want, and it just goes from 0 to 1. The length, I think there's also speed for loop. Emit from volume, you could see the length. The length, you could adjust it, and it'll just, if you could see it on this scene view, it'll just make it more lengthier, the whole cone. So it'll just stretch out the cone. So we'll put from base, emit from base. It'll emit from the cone's bottom part, and then we could also add textures if we want. This is just a little texture I have. This could be, you could put it on the actual shape, or you could do it another way. This one, like this texture, like if you want a checker pattern texture, stuff like that, you could add it. Position is just the position of the whole particle system, and the rotation of the particle system. So if we rotate it on the Z, or actually it's on the X, you could see it just flipping around. And then scale, it just scales the whole thing, the whole cone shape, aligned to the direction. If you click align to direction, it will align it to the certain direction. You could also randomize it. You could change it into a spherical direction and randomize the position. And you could also do that even if you don't have this align to direction on. So you could have a kind of a spherical direction, a randomized position, and just random direction, kind of look like almost like it's going around in circles or something. We'll keep that for now. And this, you could also change it with this. This is an editor tool that you could it helps you change it directly in the scene view. So I could actually grab it, stretch it out. I can move it, the whole particle system. I could rotate the particle system, and this one is to, I think, to scale that out. Now, now we'll look at the velocity over lifetime. Velocity over lifetime, just like it implies, it just gives it a velocity. So if we, like, let's say we do it on the Y, well, now we can't do it on the Y because we kind of messed with it, but if we move it on the Z, it'll move upwards in kind of like a spherical direction. So and then we could also change between local and world. So this is world. As you can see, the world is always the same. If you change it to local, that depends on wherever the particle system is and in their local space. So we could also change the X, make it bounce, make it look like it's bouncing. The Y, which could just scatter everything. This is orbital. So this is what it rotates around. So you can make it rotate around in the X direction and the Y direction. See, it starts rotating around, and even in the Z direction. And now it kind of looks like a tornado or something. And then you could actually move the X, and this is to offset it. So you could offset the X rotation. So now it looks like, if you see it almost, if you see it right here, you could see it kind of rotating like, let me add more, like a hurricane. The more I add to it, the more offset it gets on the X. So if I add more to it, you can see looks like a little tornado thing. And you could do the same thing with the Y, the Z, all that. Radial is hold on, give me a second. Radial over here, it says applies radial, which will project out from the center. So it will project out from the center of the whole thing, of the whole particle. So of the center of the whole thing. So you can see it almost looks like it's in the middle and something's pushing it out or something. You could add the speed modifier, makes it quicker, faster. So yeah, that's that for velocity over time. I will keep it somewhere like, and then we'll keep on going. We'll keep that checked. We could uncheck it and then check it, and all our settings will stay the same. Limit velocity over lifetime. So actually, let me uncheck this just in case we need this. Limit velocity over lifetime. I could separate the axis from the X, the Y, and the Z. So I could adjust all this, and it will adjust accordingly to each axis. And I could adjust it also by the world and local space. Speed, it just speeds everything up. Dampen, it says it controls the flow. It controls how much the velocity exceeds the velocity limit. Should be dampened. A value of 0.5 will dampen it, so it will kind of slow it down. Drag, like I mentioned in the last video, it just kind of acts like a lazy particle or something like that. Like it takes a while to move. It don't want to move. It drags. It drags itself. And then we can multiply the drag by the size and velocity. And like I said, these check marks, you could do it on pretty much or most of the things here. Now, if we inherit velocity, it will inherit the velocity, the initial velocity, or the current, and it'll multiply it by that. And lifetime by emitter speed, it will just adjust between the speed. So this speed, what they're talking about is the start speed. So let's say we got a speed of 6 and one of 5. So what it should do, as you can see, at 5 it does not emit anything, but at, or should it be 4? Okay, it should be 4. And then at 6, what it should be doing is should be disappearing. So you can't really, I don't think you could be able to tell, but when it's up here, it should last a little longer than down here. Force over lifetime, it just adds a force like it implies over its life. So you could have, if you put it on negative, it goes left, positive, right. And then same over here, if you put negative, it will go down. Or on the Z, sorry about that. If you go negative on the Z, it will go down. Positive, it will go up. And this just adds a force, of course, over the life. And then space or world, same thing again. And you could also, looks like you could randomize it. I don't know how though. Maybe if you have it all zeros, or maybe if it's random. Yeah, if it's random between 2, you could set a random position, and then you could just randomize it. It'll randomize it between 0 and 10. And then for color over lifetime, so this I actually did this off screen, but this is what it will look like, just white and white. Now this is color over lifetime. So at the start, our start of this particle system is right here in the middle. So at the start it will be white, and let's say it'll start turning red during its lifetime. So, and then we could adjust these little sliders. So let's say we want it to be white longer and just a little sparkle of red. You would put it over here, and then you would just get it closer, and now you could just see a little bit of sparkles of red. And then you could also add multiple ones. You could add 5, 6, 7, whatever you want, and you just change it right here, any color you want. You know, just emit any colors you want. This is the color over lifetime. So color over speed is basically the same thing, but it takes the speed of the particle system, which is right here, start speed, and then it will change the color depending on that. So we got, let's say, 4 and 6. So if I lessen this, it will get wider. If I get it closer, it will get more red. Same with this one. If I get this one closer, it'll start getting more red. And then if I go further, or actually no, actually this is the speed range, never mind. So the speed range, it depends on the speed. So usually it goes, the start speed is at 5. So it's gonna start at red, and then it'll end wherever it has to. So that's why when it starts at 0, it's gonna start at white, and then as it moves along, it will end up red. Now, for size over lifetime, this just we could separate it and it'll just make different sizes depending on its lifetime. Like if we wanted to get it, let's say we want it to be, oh, but this is separated. So we could do just the size just by itself. So it will start small and start getting bigger. Or we could do it the opposite way. It will start big and then start getting smaller. And you can also add points on these curves anywhere you want. Just click twice and then you could just adjust it. So you could have it, let's say it gets big and gets small. And it's going to get big again. And then it's going to get small again. So that's what that's doing. We also, like I mentioned before, we have predefined curves. And you could just click on each one and you could see the sample of each predefined curve. Let's just stick with this one. Started looking like stars or something. And now size by speed. This is the size it will get depending on the speed. So you could adjust it like this with the curve. So at first the size will be at 1, and then I think this would be the speed, and then you could also adjust it right here through the speed range. So 1 and let's say 5, and then they got the separate axis as well, just like every other one. Just you could play with that. Just mess with everything in this thing, in this particle system. There's a lot of things you could do with it. Of course, I can't show you how to do everything with it, but I could show you how to get started. This is rotation over lifetime, as it implies. You probably know everything there is to know by now. You could use separate axes, and you could change each axis. So this one will rotate on the X, the Y, the Z. And then you could also just use the angular velocity and I'll just change it. You could do a random, I think, between 2. And then, yeah, that's it for the rotation. You can't really see these too much because they're just circles. But if, let's say if you had an arrow or, I don't know, even a bullet or something, you would be able to see it rotate more clearly. So same thing, you could separate the axis. You could just rotate it all together. You could rotate between 2 consonants. If you separate the axis, let me see. You separate the axis and put the random between 2 curves. You'll also be able to adjust the speed range. And yeah, so that's it for that. Rotation by speed. So external forces, of course you've seen that. That's what you use the particle system force to be able to create this sphere-like thing. Without it, you probably would be able to create it, but it would be much difficult to create it. So this, just checking this, adding this force field to it, is way simpler. Like I said, if you want to learn how to do this, check my previous video. And let's go on. Now I'm going to uncheck this real quick. Well, you'll be able to see it. So if I check noise, noise is pretty much just movement. It creates like if you remember old TVs, they had that static noise. It was just a bunch of little dots that moved around. Well, this is something like it. It's noise. So if let's say we uncheck this, it'll probably be easier to see. Let me uncheck that. Let me uncheck this real quick. So now you see that they're just moving in a certain way. If I check this and you give us a time, you can see that they're actually moving around like with the noise. So if we expand this noise, and there's a couple things we could do. Of course, the separate axis, X, Y, and Z. We could select the strength, so that's how much it will move. So if we bump it to something like, so like 36, we see there's a lot of movement, way too much movement. So let's bump it down again. Sorry guys, my computer's kind of warming up here. So as you can see, the more noise you have, the slower your computer will work. So try to set something. I usually go between 1 and 5. I honestly didn't know you could go that high. So if I put, let's say 5, even it seems like even 5 is a little too much. You could see it starts scattering everywhere, almost like fireflies or something. Now let's set this back to 1. I don't know if you guys could hear my computer kind of heating up, but if you do, sorry about that. So now the frequency, it just means how frequent that noise will be. So I'm not sure if this one goes 0 to 1. I hope it does. So it just adds more frequency to it. I think you guys, yeah, see, you can see a little more frequency to it, and you can see also on the preview how there's a lot of little, like, it almost looks like bumps. So I'm gonna set that back to 0.5, and then I'm gonna show you the scroll speed. The scroll speed is just how fast this preview speeds up. So see, you can see the frequency of the picture just moving. Go back. So dampening, it dampens the noise, and then for octaves, it adds more. If you look at the preview, you can see that it adds more. How can I say it? More rows, more detail. You can say almost, and then with that you could also adjust the multiplier and the scale here, and then there's quality. So depending on what quality of noise you want, you could have low level. If you have a low level, you can see in this preview that it looks not too well. And then if you go to medium, you can see it looks a little better. And it also does affect how the particle systems are moving. So of course the high 3D, it'll have a better noise movement. You could also remap the noise texture right here. If you check the remap, and when you remap it, you'll get that remap curve enabled. So you could get that remap the curve. You could adjust the curve with the predefined ones, or you could adjust it how you want, and that will just, like I mentioned, it will remap the noise. You could put a position amount. I'm just gonna kind of go by these a little quicker because yeah, this computer is acting up. So position amount, you could rotate the amount and size the amount. Turn off the noise, hopefully that'll help a little bit. Collision. So collision, I will talk about this more in depth in another video, but pretty much if you add a game object and it has some sort of collision, let's put it like right in the middle, and it has some sort of collision, and you want the particles to kind of bounce off that game object, you could just create a game object, have it let me disable this. So visual bounds, when you're on the scene view, you'll be able to see the like colliders, but that only works in the scene view, not in the game. And then you could actually send collision messages through script if you have this checked on. And I will show you how I implement this in one of my games to destroy an enemy with a particle system. So for example, if you have some sort of fire and you want it to either damage a player or you want it to kill a player, you will be able to send a collision message or send some kind of trigger that will kill the player. That will tell the script or the code, you know what, this guy touched the particle, the fire particle, it's time to deal them some damage or something of that sort. Now, for some reason, it's taking a while to show an example of this working. We can add a collider. I don't know, just a collider. Real quick. Later on, I'll show you how to add colliders, all that stuff on game objects. So once the collider is there, we have the plane, and now to actually show this, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna untrigger. Which one was it that's making? I think it's size, and then I'm gonna add a gravity. So now you can see is that my particles will get affected. It's not by this one, but actually it is by that one. So what you would do is you would create a game object, an empty one, and then you would have it positioned right here. And now wherever this game object is at, the particle systems will bounce off of. So if you have it, let's say way down here, the game object, an empty game object, the particle systems will bounce down there. Now when you have that, you could also change the visualization to a grid, which is it'll just show this green line. Let me see if you can see it. Just this green line will change to a solid or to a grid. You could scale it, make it smaller, make it larger, but it won't have any effect on the collisions. And then after that, you could also dampen it, just like everything else. You could, so if you see it, there's some of them that actually stay stuck onto the wall, onto the floor. You could add less bounce. So let's say so there's a couple that bounce, a couple don't. Lifetime loss. So this is when the particle collides, it will lose the fraction of its start lifetime. So if it's on, if the particle system lasts 2 seconds, then it'll just last 1 because of this being on. And then, so a lot of them, as soon as they touch, they die. And then minimum kill speed and maximum kill speed. This is when particles collide, their speed is higher than the value they are killed. Same for this one, it's the same thing. But minimum, and then radius scale. So you could just scale of the radius of the collision. So it could have less of a collision or more, depending on the radius. And then of course this collision will send messages, and then this is the visual bound of the whole collisions. Right now you can't really see it. Let me see. Yeah, you can't really see it, but it's there. And then for collisions, that would be that. Now for triggers is almost the same thing, but this needs a collider. I'll put the collider right here, put it down. Now when you have a collider like this, the particle system will, let me show you. So depending on what it is, so let's say, okay, the particle system is down here. So let's say, let me close this and this. So let's say inside the collider, kill the particles. So if you see that the particles are right there, and you see some of them are surviving, but some are in the particles, so they're just dying. So let's say we have this ignore, and we kill them outside. Anything outside of it will be killed. And since everything is outside, everything is going to be killed. So, and then after that, as soon as it enters the collider, same thing, kill it. And then as soon as it exits the collider, kill it. So if you can see right here, it goes a little further than if it was in here. So, and then there's the radius scale of the trigger, and then the visual bounds of the trigger. So if you have the visual bounds on and the radius scale, if you adjust it, you could see. And then that's that for triggers. Sub-emitters. Sub-emitters is if you have two or let's say more particles, you can have a sub-emitter. So let's say we make another particle. Let's add a particle. We have one, so let's add a particle right here. And I'm pretty sure the particle has to be a child of this parent of this game object. But let me make sure. If I drag it, it says yes. Do you want to make it into a child? It's not a child right now, so yes, repairing it, and you'll see this particle system will be a child of this one. As soon as my computer starts acting up, while it's acting up, a sub-emitter is just so a particle system is an emitter. It's something that emits particles. There's this invisible thing, and it just shoots out particles. And that thing that shoots out particles is called an emitter. So this sub-emitter is something that shoots out particles, but it's not just one of them. It's two. So there's a parent and then there's a child. So this birth right here, you could have it inherit or you can have it start during birth. Alright guys, sorry about that again. So the sub-emitters started kicking in, and as you can see, there's, well, you can't really tell too much, but there's two particle systems going on now. So what I could do is I could switch one to green so we could see which one's the sub-emitter and which one is the actual particle system. Now if this keeps happening to you guys, your best bet is what is going on is that you have too much particles going on at once. So what you could do, if this thing works, what you could do is right here where it says max particles, you could just decrease that. Same with emission, decrease that. Make sure you don't have too much particles at once. So as you can see that the sub-emitter, I changed it to green, and now you can see the green coming off. That's what the sub-emitters do. So the sub-emitter, I could have it from birth to start playing, from collision, or from death. So these sub-emitters will only play when it dies. So pretty much, yeah, as soon as it dies, it will play. And there's also trigger and a manual. So if you click manual, you'll most likely have to do it manually, probably through script. Same with trigger. And then you could have it inherit something, and also have the probability of this particle system playing. So if it's set to 0, it will never play. If you have it at 1, there's pretty good chance that it will play. Now you could inherit everything from, so this particle system, which is the sub-emitter, can inherit everything from this particle system. So the green, if I wanted to inherit that white color, I click color, and now it will just do its magic, and it will change my sub-emitters, which right now are green, into a white color. Now if I restart it, it should inherit the color, unless it's, oh, okay. So this particle actually inherits the color, if that makes sense. So if you can see, it actually inherits the color right here. And then as you can see, you could get the probability, and you could actually add more emitters. You could add as much as you want with different particles. and that's how you would do that. So if you wanted to do, let's say, a fire and a sub emitter being the smoke coming out of the fire, you could do that. Now for texture sheet animation, this, for you to be able to do that, I'll show you later in better detail, but all you got to know is you would have to have a texture sheet like this. For example, it's pretty much just a bunch of pictures that that represent something like an explosion or whatever you want as the particle. And then you would set this up here as either grid or sprites. So you could have an individual sprite, and then let's say you could add another sprite, and then it could be something else, and then you could just keep going like that and adding, and as the animation plays frame by frame, it will animate for you the particle. So that is a good way if you're a great drawer, if you know how to draw real good or anything like that. You could draw a fire from start to from beginning to end, and you could bring it into Unity and you could animate it here with the particle system. Now for lights I also have to show you in another video, because 2D scenes right now they have lighting, but these lights do not work unless you download some stuff. You could download, let's say, like the universal render pipeline, and that would work. Or you could do other things, and I'll mention that in a later video. This video already is pretty long, so I'm gonna try to finish this real quick. But you could add your light right here. You could have the ratio of the light. You can have the distribution randomly, or you can have you can have the light use the particle color. You can have it affect the range, the size. You can have all these different things, and you could also randomize it if you want. And then for let's see, trails I will show you in the next video coming up, how to use trails and the trail and the line renderer. Like I said, I'll show you that in the next video. But you could have trails, and as you can see, these trails, they don't really look too good. But if you go down here on the renderer, you could actually make a trail material. For now, we could use this default, and as you can see the trails coming off. And yeah, you could use this as particles or as a ribbon. And you can't really see right now, but as you can see, there's little, but it's kind of 3D-ish. So, and then there's a ratio of each particle, a line. You can make it thick. You can make the lifetime longer, shorter. So if you barely want the trail renderer to work, just keep it at a low number. Little trails. Minimum. This right here is how sharp the trail will be. So if, let's say, we got a longer one, and you have this, you can see the little curves coming out at the beginning of the trail. There's like a little hook, little curve. And if I set it high, you won't see any curve at all. We could use world space, or we could have it die with, and we could also have it die with the particles, or have it live separately. We can have the texture stretched out, tiled out, have it distribute per segment, or even repeat per segment. So depending on what trail you have. Right now, as you've seen, we just use the regular particle system material. And then after that, there's the size that affects the width. Size affects lifetime. We could also change the color over lifetime. We could change it between two colors, and that would be gradient. So it'll be red, and then it'll turn white. To show this a little bit better, red and then white. And then also color over the trail, so we can have another separate color over that trail. And we could generate lighting data. This is good if when you build your game, if you want to generate lighting data to save on some performance. Shadow bias, add some shadow to it. Right now we're on 3D mode. You can't really see too much of the shadow, but I mean on 2D mode. If you were on 3D mode, with actual like ground and everything, you would be able to see it a little better. So that would be it for the trails. For custom data, this is pretty much only helpful for like when you're coding or scripting. As you can see right there, it says custom data to be read in scripts or shaders. Use custom particle data from script to send shaders, or send to shaders. So this is just to send custom data to the scripts. Right here on renderer, we got the render mode, which you can have billboard, and this will render the particle system itself. So we could have it stretched, the particle system stretched. I don't know if you want to make drops or something with the regular particle system material. We can have horizontal ones. You can't really see that one. We could have vertical, a mesh. So if you want to have an actual mesh of a cube or a capsule or a sphere or anything you want. We also have, let me set this to billboard. We have the direction. So you could set the direction to be 0 or 1. This is the material, whatever material you want to use. You can use the particle systems, any kind of material you have at the moment. You could also set the sort mode. So the sort mode by distance, by oldest in front, youngest in front. This is good for sorting out particles. Sorting fudge. This one I'm not sure. This one lower the number, and most likely these particles will appear in front of the transparent object. So if you lower the number, it most likely will appear in front of the transparent object. You could set a minimum particle system size and a maximum, so they'll have two different sizes, and won't let you pass that. You could have a render alignment, which is where it will render in the world, in the view, in the local space, in the facing space, or facing you, velocity. You could also flip each particle depending on which axis. You can allow a roll, or like a rotation with the camera, and then you could pivot it. You could also visualize the pivot if you want to, and masking if you wanted to be visible inside masks. In one of my videos, I talked about sprite masks, and I mentioned how I will talk about it again in another video, and I will, as soon as I get to it. I'll let you guys know. You could apply active color space, custom vertex streams. So color space is just so if you have like a sky that applies light to the world, you can have the color also affect it. Custom vertex streams. This one says choose whether to send custom data to the shader. You could also cast shadows if you want. Two-sided shadows, shadows only, just shadows on. You could receive shadows. The shadow bias, it applies to prevent self-shadowing, so it don't shadow itself. Motion vectors. This is good for camera motion. If you want to have camera motion only, no motion, or just the object's motion. And then the ordering layer. I also mentioned this in earlier video where I talk about you could have different ordering layers. I even have the background layer from the first video, and I could set it. So if I have a layer that is lower, then it will be set first. So if I put this one as a negative number, it will be behind my background. Actually I don't have no background, so I can't even do that. But anyways, if you had a background, and let's say this background was at 0, you could put this particle system at -1, and it'll be behind the background where you won't be able to see the actual particle system, if that makes sense. And then there's also light probes and reflection probes. That one's a little more advanced. I will show you guys that in a 3D video, because light probes and reflection probes are used in 3D videos. Light probes just give better bounce the light better, And reflection probes also give better reflection. So if you have a reflection probe next to certain metal objects or wet floors, it will reflect objects a little better. So that is it for this video. I'm sorry for having it so long. If you made it till the end of the video, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and hit the subscribe button for any future videos. Thank you for everything. Bye.